Good morning. Good morning. Bill Ulivari with the Blockchain Advisor podcast and YouTube channel. So thrilled to have Hannah Rosenberg in an interview with us today from sunny Puerto Rico, San Juan. And so what I'm looking to do again is trying to connect with some of the people I first met in the Bitcoin and blockchain space back in 2016 and have these conversations about how people that really were the foundational members of this whole movement, how where they're at, what are they doing, how have things evolved. So Hannah, thank you so much for joining me today and being with us. So please, give us, if you could, a few minutes about your history. Let's just spend 3 or 4 minutes about what was Hannah like as a little girl or as a teenager. What were you into? And just give us a 3-minute overview, quick, of your interest, hobbies, things like that.
Yeah, well, if you want to go all the way back to childhood, I did have a bit of an unusual one. I was homeschooled. So I didn't, I wasn't in the science club in high school because I didn't go to high school. I was in my living room. So that was an interesting upbringing. But no, I was born in Niles, Illinois, in an apartment in Niles, Illinois, and spent really most of my life probably in Chicago. And I it's very interesting to have kids, right? Like there's some karma to having a kid that's just like you. And so I think I have a better perspective on myself when I was younger, now that I have a daughter that seems to be a very similar temperament. So I would say I was I'm a very focused person. Someone who maybe gets a little too obsessive, a little too fixated, and maybe a little bit too detail oriented sometimes. No, when I was a kid or a teenager, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. And there wasn't anything. I loved Star Trek. And for a time, I wanted to be a photographer for the National Geographic. But I did have a very interesting upbringing in that, you met my father. My father's involved with some very interesting things. And so I grew up with very, very interesting dinner conversation and dinner debate.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably one of the best things about my childhood for me is we would just sit there and have these just random like philosophical debates or political debates or technical debates, just every day. And so I think that was very good for me. And I think it sets you up to really also being homeschooled and sort of being the odd one out kind of does have its advantages where it gives you a very like third party perspective on whatever's going on in the world. You're not like, I'm this thing and we do this. You're just like, I'm this weirdo who's sitting in this room for some reason and what's going on here, And so I think in some ways that's very helpful because it helps you to recognize weird and interesting things like Bitcoin, crypto when it comes up. Yeah, because you're not like particularly attached to any, I had no particular attachment to the US dollar. So sure, what's this Bitcoin thing? This is interesting, So it gives you an interesting perspective.
And so was your dad talking about Bitcoin back then when you were at homeschool, or is this something you discovered on your own?
So I'd say like my dad was never like, hey, Hannah, look at this Bitcoin thing. Like that didn't happen, but I do have to, I know for certain I got sort of my interest in economics and monetary theory from conversations with my dad. So, Bitcoin, this was, long before Bitcoin was a thing, but, we would talk about money and the way money works and, fractional reserve banking and this type of stuff, which I didn't really understand until I went to UIC and took some monetary theory classes. And then I'll credit Marie Rothbard really more than UIC with my understanding of fiat. But, I kind of had an idea that money was this interesting thing that functioned in this very strange way. And I think that really kind of set me up on, studying economics at UIC and then becoming really curious about alternative currencies. So I followed a lot of the alternative currency projects that existed prior to Bitcoin. So like the eGold, eBullion, Liberty Reserve, these type of weird projects that were out there. That's actually how I got my first Bitcoin is I was actually, so I just had my first kid, and I was in Australia, just sitting at home by myself with the baby in Australia. And I wound up doing some customer service work for my dad's business. And he sent me Liberty Reserve, and then I converted my Liberty Reserve into Bitcoin. And that's how I got my first Bitcoin.
Oh, that is so cool. That is so cool. Well, listen, we share another common interest because I have 4 children. 2 of them were homeschooled. And
nice.
in 2016, for a homeschool project, we built a 6 GPU mining rig Ethereum machine, my son and I.
That's so cool.
So,
yeah.
So I know the homeschoolers get a bad rap, but I am telling you, it, in my opinion, blows the doors off of traditional Cartesian sit in a row kind of schooling. So maybe my son didn't have all the clubs, right, and all the extracurricular activities. But I can tell you this right now, there isn't one homeschooler or one kid in the United States that in 2016 built an Ethereum mining rig as a homeschool project. And I'm like, yes, that's so cool.
Yeah, homeschooling is really cool because it allows for, individualized education.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you go to a standard school and it's a sort of one size fits all type of thing. But I think it also depends, I have 3 siblings. And so all of us are homeschooled and all of us took to it differently. So I think it also depends quite a lot on the personality of the kid,
For sure.
Like my older daughter, wants to be homeschooled. I'm like, oh, we'll see. I'm a little busy. And then my younger one just can't wait to go to school and talk to all her friends and hang out. She's a very social creature,
Sure.
So,
and also we lived, I live in Glenview and you grew up in Niles. So we were just geographically pretty close. So that's really cool. So I noticed on Twitter recently, you posted a list of some of your favorite books, some books that had an influence on you. Could you just go through those real quick?
Yeah, I did. So I just came out with this, released a course, which we can talk about in a little bit. And so I was thinking about, I was so happy to do that course because it was kind of, resource that would have been really great if I had that when I first got into it. And then I started thinking about all the various different resources I had read that kind of led me up to understanding Bitcoin and kind of really getting it. And so, it was, oh boy, where did I start? I can't remember what I started with.
The creature at Jekyll Island, I think, was the number one. I've got to get my reading glasses on, and it's around here somewhere on my Twitter feed, but I seem to remember that was
I'd
one.
have to pull it up. Yeah, but it certainly was one of the early ones. And that one, my dad did give me that book. And that book is, I called it eccentric, and it is certainly eccentric. But I thought it was really, really good because there's that one section in the book that really walks through fiat money and how it functions. And that's so valuable because it explains it in pretty easy to understand terms. And in this stuff, it's like, God, sometimes, if you want to put your tinfoil hat on, you'd say it's intentionally really confusing. Because I remember I took a monetary theory class at UIC, and I swear I walked out of there more confused than when I walked in. And just the concept of seigniorage gain. Do you know that term?
Go ahead. No, let's explain it to me.
And I could not understand what the bleep they were talking about in class. What is seigniorage gain? And I stayed after class and talked to my professor. I still didn't understand it. And then come years later, I realized seigniorage gain is the benefit you get from being able to print your own money. But no one will tell you that's what it is. They have to put it in really fancy terminology. So the creature from Jekyll Island was really, really valuable, and it helped me to understand just sort of the mechanics of fiat money.
And the self-sovereign individual, I think, was another one.
I just pulled it up on Twitter here. So yes, the sovereign individual was one of the most important books I read. And this was 15 years ago that I read it. So I can't even remember it that much, but it's one of those books where I remember reading it on the bus on my way to UPS when I used to work at UPS, in the package sorting hub at UPS. And I remember just reading it on the bus, and then you just walk into the building and everything looks different. One of those books that just warps your brain.
It's like the Matrix.
And you just see everything differently. And that book really walked through how technology impacts culture and society and how things are formed and all of that. And I credit that book with making me a technological determinist.
Oh, interesting.
The idea that, someone who thinks that technology is like the real changing factor in, you know, our societal structures and culture and all that. Of course, it's complicated. I like to have this debate, been having this debate for like a decade with my husband about whether or not it's technology or culture. And I've come to the conclusion that it's both, but I still think technology is more important. He thinks culture is more important.
Interesting.
But,
well, you know, I tell you, this could be like a whole nother conversation, because for me, technology is inert, it's agnostic, but whether it's done for good or for evil is the philosophical question, which impacts culture. So to have philosophy and technology for me is like a super cool dinner evening with bourbon and wine, and I could just go on like that for hours. So let's do a cocktails and culture conversation.
Cocktails and wine and technological determinism. Let's do it. I'm down for that. Yeah.
Done. I'm in. I'm in. So Hannah, I remember the first time that I first met Ethereum and Bitcoin. I heard about it like in June or July of 2016. I found the Bob Meetup group in, I think, 2016. I remember sending you a message because once I understood like how the mining works, and again, for me, it was like philanthropy and how do we help poor countries, and I could mine my Ethereum address to some poor Nigerian woman anywhere in the world, and I could like help elevate her out of that situation. I think I contacted you. You had me call you on the phone. And I remember this
well, randomly. I don't know why, but like you'd sent a message to the Meetup group.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, who's this? And, you know, it's like you get some random message like, who is this? You know, could be some weirdo scammer, who knows, you know, but, you know, no, it's not. But you know, you're just like so enthusiastic about this. You're like, someone wants to talk about crypto. Yay, let's call him. And I was driving down Milwaukee Avenue. So I remember that well. I was like, I'm gonna call this random dude as I drive home. This will be fun. Yeah.
And I just remember sitting on the floor with my one hand on my head and the other hand on my cell phone, trying to understand like mining and how we could help the globe. And you're like, well, you know, I only have a certain amount of time, but why don't you come to the Bob Meetup group? And at that time, it was Chicago Bitcoin and Open Blockchain. It met at Peace Pizza, I think, on North Avenue or Fullerton. Milwaukee.
Yeah, North
okay.
Milwaukee. Yep.
And I remember it took me an hour and 10 minutes to drive down there during traffic. And I think my car practically overheated. But anyhow, tell us a little bit more about how you found the you know, how you were one of the co-founders of the Bob Meetup group. You know, what are the good things, the bad things, and like how that might have helped you solidify your place in this space?
Yeah, no, that meet has been absolutely huge for me. So I found Bitcoin when I was living out in Australia, literally out in the countryside of Australia, nursing a baby while my husband worked in the coal mines. It's actually true. But so there wasn't much going on. And then when we got back to Chicago in mid 2014, I was like, I'm going to go find people I can talk to about Bitcoin. And there wasn't a lot of meetups going on. And I was actually thinking of starting one because there was one group that existed, but they weren't really doing anything. And then Pamela Morgan and Brooke Mahlers, they're the ones that started the Bob Meetup. But I was in the process of thinking about starting a meetup. And then I saw this announcement on the Meetup website. And I'm like, I'm there. And so I was at the first one, walked in, I was so excited. And I was like, can I help you? You know, like, let me know if you need help. And yeah, you know, I love, you're right. It was really interesting space years ago before it got to as big as it is now. Cause you know, the first meetup I went to wasn't Bob, it was this other group. And it was the back office, the back room in some guy's office out in the burbs somewhere, I can't remember. And it was like me and 5 other people. And 2 of those people are still really good friends of mine. And the other 3 people are just crazy, you know, like it was, that was the space at that time. So you would meet, like, there's a really high percentage of very interesting people, and they could be interesting and like concerning or interesting and really awesome, you know?
Yeah, that reminds me of an old WKRP in Cincinnati episode where Les Nessman is talking about a girl being funny, or she thought that he was funny, and he said, funny peculiar or funny ha ha. So like,
yes,
okay,
yes.
And so based on, so I love coming down to the Bob groups. It was really great being with you guys, but I'll be honest with you, you know, the commute, you know, an hour and 10 down, and 45 minutes home was just a little bit much for me. So I thought, hey, why not use their footprint? And so I started the North Shore Bitcoin and Blockchain Meetup group, which was great. Again, you have like 40 people show up. There's like only 10 you really want there. The other 30 are there for free pizza, right? And for just shooting the breeze. So I know where you're coming from. It's like the Pareto's law of Bitcoin meetup groups. Only 20% are really cool. And the other 80%, like I can do without those. But
those 20% are some of the coolest people you're ever going to meet. You
absolutely.
know?
Absolutely. We're still friends with them. And I probably shuttered that maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago because, with COVID and, it just wasn't getting much traction. And I just felt like I was, being used, for free food and pizza because my wife and I did like amazing catered. Anyhow. So tell us a little bit about how all these experiences has helped you start Velas Commerce and tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think, Brooke, moved out to Colorado and Pamela went off on adventures. And so I wound up, Mark for a while and me wound up running the Bob Meetup. And, it is kind of, like I spent a lot of money on it, buying pizza and venue space and whatnot. But I feel like it has been like absolutely what created a career in crypto for me because of just all of the people I got to meet. And I would just take projects. I mean, I ran it kind of selfishly where I would just be like, I'm really interested in this project. I want to meet that person. I'll invite him to talk at the meetup,
right.
And so it worked out really well. And I'm thankfully think that the community appreciated the events as well. So that was always really good. But it absolutely was, and it baffled me that at times I had trouble finding people to help with the meetup because it was just my obsession, that's where I wanted to be. And I would just, be waiting till I could go to the next one. And, but it was my vehicle for my crypto obsession for a long time. And I learned so much and met so many people. And that's kind of like the foundation then, which I have the career I have now built on top of that. But we talked about Velas. So I worked as a e-commerce web dev. I did very traditional web dev stuff, WordPress, Drupal, Magento, LampStack, all of that very standard web dev stuff. But got doing e-commerce stuff and was just in love with Bitcoin. And if you ever look at, the technical specifics of how a credit card transaction works versus the technical specifics of how a Bitcoin transaction works. I mean, credit cards were not made for the internet. This is, the amount of credit card fraud we have out there. It's just, I could go into, a deep dive on that one, but I won't. But long story short, credit cards are awful technology for the internet. I'm sure they were great for their time, but awful technology for the internet. Bitcoin vastly better. So in about 2014, when we got back to Chicago, I was still at home with the kids, but I was like, all right, I'm going to go back to work soon. Maybe I'll go back part-time. I was working part-time as a web dev. I'm going to set up this business to just help people switch from credit cards to Bitcoin because obviously it's so much better. And it is. But I was a little bit too early to market, there was still. And so I actually wound up getting very involved in crypto education. And this is what happens, I think, so often in the crypto space, at least in my experience in it, is you have this particular idea of this thing you want to do, but you're way too early. And so you have to wind up building all the rungs on the ladder between here and there, Right. It's like, I want to do this thing, but no one even knows about it. So, okay, so first we have to educate people. All right, let's do crypto education, or even silly little things like I want to add this, I worked on a project once where we wanted to be able to log into a WordPress website using uPorts based on, self-sovereign identity tool based on Ethereum. Like, okay, cool, let's do that. Oh crap, the library that we need to work with this website doesn't even exist. All right, first we have to write a library. Then we, it's like always you're just like, you're building all the rungs on the ladder to get there. Yeah. So, I became very involved in, that's how I sort of fell backwards into crypto education. Which I've been doing for a long time as well. So wound up teaching some courses at UIC, which was a ton of fun.
Excellent.
And then, I've written a lot of courses, worked at the Institute in Chicago for a while and all of that. But now now we're finally at the right time where there's enough tools in place where people are actually really starting to use crypto. And I'm sure you're familiar with El Salvador and what happens there.
Yes.
Yes.
So tell me, who is your ideal client? Who is your, if someone were to text message you or email you or whatever and contact you, who was like, give me your top 2 type of perfect clients?
Yeah. So a project I would be super excited about would be like, let's say someone who has a business that does a lot of online commerce. So let's take we'll go pie in the sky sort of example, Uber, right?
Mhm.
Uber does all of these transactions. And if Uber were to get on the phone and be like, hey, Hannah, we have a great business here, but we'd really like to start using Lightning instead of US dollars. Can you
Mhm.
help us with that? Like that would be like the dream
Bing.
project.
Got it.
Yes.
Excellent.
That exact
Excellent.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I mean, a lot of the conversation that I've seen lately, now that there's more institutional adoption, pension funds, looking at Bitcoin, there certainly does seem to be this higher awareness now. And, I did a podcast or an interview yesterday, a day before yesterday, for the National Association of Corporate Directors. Now, here are people who are on the boards, who are international companies, 60% of them are international. They're asking me, and most of them are bankers or ex-bankers, so they're trying to understand how remittances work, how international payments work. So again, we're a little bit ahead of the curve, but it's so fun to be there. I love that conversation.
Yes.
So that's really interesting, Uber. So since you brought up the Lightning Network, let's talk a few minutes about that. Now, I have to be honest with you, I tried to understand it from a few YouTube videos and it didn't click. I watched and listened to a few interviews with Jack Mallers, since you brought up El Salvador and how that works. So I understand, in my mind, I can picture the Bitcoin payment network as a set of railroad tracks, but actual Bitcoin, the currency, like a train card that sits on top of it. 2 different things, right? It's the currency and then the payment rail. And you can send US dollars to the payment rail. I can envision that in my mind. But as someone with an old Antminer over here, someone with an old S9 over there, somebody that's actually ran a node and watched nothing happen on the node.
Yes.
How, and I understand, I've downloaded the Strike app on my phone, but I haven't sent anything yet. Like, I still don't know how the whole conversion from connecting it to my debit account at my local bank to Bitcoin, then flip it back to the local currency, like how that all works, and not lose any slippage in the Bitcoin. Like, I don't get that. So could you maybe try to help me understand how a second layer payment network works on the Bitcoin network?
Yes, let's get into it. Okay, so Lightning is my current crypto obsession. I love the Lightning Network because I think it kind of fulfills the promise of crypto commerce that I got really excited about back when I was doing e-commerce stuff and when I first started Velas. But so Lightning came about largely as a scaling mechanism, because blockchains are fabulous, but they have this really big scaling problem. So the example I like to use is that if I were to go down the street here and buy, I bought a cup of green tea this morning, right? And I use a debit card, and that goes through Visa's payment network. So that Starbucks needs to know about it. Maybe they have a bank here in San Juan. They probably have another bank in New York, and then they have a branch in Chicago. And my bank I'm using is still one that's based in Chicago. So there's like 4 or 5 different entities that are all going to know about that transaction, right? Mm-hmm. Now, in contrast, let's say I walked in there and instead I paid with Bitcoin on chain. I did a regular Bitcoin transaction. So how many nodes, Bitcoin nodes are there in the world? At least 13,000, probably there's just thousands and thousands of nodes all around the world. Every last one of them has to know about that transaction and validate it. Yep. Now that's entirely necessary to the decentralization and the functioning of the network, but it's a really big scaling problem. Right? I mean, does it make sense for everyone in the world on the Bitcoin network to know that I bought a cup of green tea this morning? Like, I wouldn't say that that's valuable enough information to make it into the blockchain, right? Okay. I like to say space in a public blockchain is a scarce and valuable resource, right? So there's this big scaling problem, and there's different aspects of it. People really like to focus on transactions per second, right? If you have all this, everyone has to know about all this data and you have to coordinate it all around the globe. You can only process so much at once. So there's a a bottleneck on how many transactions you can do per second. But there's also this problem of blockchain bloat, just filling the blockchain up with everyone's morning Starbucks run. And then there's just a problem of coordinating that data. And there's actually a physical problem of just the rails on which you transfer that packet, those packets of information. So big scaling problem. What I love about Lightning is it allows for local knowledge, right? So Lightning is, right, when I send someone a Lightning transaction, it is entirely real Bitcoin. It is a real Bitcoin transaction. It's just what we're doing, essentially. It's like I write you a check, and I sign it, and I give it to you, but you hold on to it, but you don't take it to the bank, right?
Okay.
And so we can, essentially me setting up a channel with you, like let's say you open up a cafe and you're selling fabulous green tea. And so every morning I stop by and I want to buy a cup of your green tea. And every morning we'd set up a channel, kind of like setting up a joint account. Say me and you are going to set up a joint checking account together. I'm going to put $200 into this account. You have nothing in there, right? And every morning I walk into your cafe and I write you a check that says, okay, in our joint account, now I own 195 and $5 of that is yours. Here's, I sign the piece of paper that says so and I hand it to you, right? I come in the next day and this time I say, okay, now I own 190 and you own $10 and I sign the check and hand it to you. So we just like these kind of IOUs back and forth, except they're entirely valid. Like they're real signed Bitcoin transactions at any time. Either one of us can take the last transaction that we did with each other and broadcast it onto the blockchain. We can settle at any time. So this way, me and you could theoretically be transacting back and forth indefinitely. And only me and you need to know what's going on. The rest of the blockchain doesn't need to know anything. All they know is that we set up this joint checking account together. That's the only thing they know. From there, they know nothing else. So it allows for this local knowledge, which solves all three scaling problems: transactions per second, blockchain bloat, and just the data transfer, because it only requires local knowledge. So that's kind of the gist of what's happening on Lightning.
So are you saying then that if I use the Strike app and I were to send you money right now, that the money, so the money that I send you kind of stays in queue until I close the channel and then that money is cashed out? Like, I'm still not.
Kind of. Well, let's talk a little bit about routing, right?
Okay.
Because this is me setting up transacting directly with you. But we can also do a route. Let's say Brooke has, a shop in Boulder, which she does, right? And I want to buy something at Brooke's shop, but I don't have that joint checking account, that channel set up with her. But you do. You and Brooke are connected. And so I could digitally, via our wallets, I could say, hey, Bill, I'm going to send you, $10. I'm going to write you this IOU for $10. So I'm going to update our joint checking account. Can you update your joint checking account with Brooke? And can you sort of transfer that money through to her? And I'm going to give you, 5 cents for your troubles, to go through and do that. So because this is it's not computationally difficult because you don't have to mine it. It's just basically, reading a transaction and then putting a signature on another transaction. The way it's structured, no one can steal anyone else's money. Worst case scenario, your money just gets a little bit of $5 of your money gets locked up for a week or something, and then you get it back. Like that's worst case scenario. And so you would say, oh, sure, I'll transfer that money through. And then, so because we can do this routing, you can wind up where probably you can interact or send money to anyone on the Lightning Network, as long as we all have, good connections, which we're getting to that point where we now have. So as far as this, we can all basically transfer these IOUs back and forth to each other as many times as we want all day long. The only time the blockchain, the main chain, gets involved is when someone either wants to change the channel relationship with someone. So let's say I move, right? I'm no longer in Chicago. I'm now in San Juan. I'm not going to go to your green tea cafe every morning. So I close our joint checking account and I open one with someone here in San Juan. Then the blockchain would know about that. those
Got it.
two changes, but otherwise it wouldn't know about anything else. So it is, I mean, people like to debate this, but I'd say it's real Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin
Sure.
that you can spend on chain at any time you want, or just keep exchanging around the Lightning Network.
So is the Lightning Network app that I have on my phone, is it like Signal, where it's actually the channel transaction is in my phone locally, and we're doing like a peer-to-peer IOU,
then,
or does my old Antminer actually see what's happening on the Lightning Network right away, but it's holding it in the mempool, and then it gets
right. So
I'm almost there.
Lightning
I'm almost there. I
transactions,
think I'm getting
very
it.
close. So when we set up a channel, that is an on-chain transaction, and your Antminer would see that.
Okay.
Like that would go through a node, it would get mined, it would get put in the blockchain. When we do these transactions with each other, your miner never knows anything about it. It doesn't see it. It never touches the mempool until you actually settle the transaction.
Got it. So
or
it's out there
close the channel.
somewhere okay.
But it's really cool because it's only local knowledge.
Got it.
You only need to know what's local to you, which is what enables all of the scaling.
Okay, very cool. Good. Well, yes, you brought up Brooke again. I had a great conversation with her and her husband, Bill. I just love touching base with people that really helped introduce me to this space. So this is really interesting. I'd like to have more Lightning Network conversations with you, because it certainly does seem to completely solve the scaling problem. And at first I thought the Bitcoin Cash guys, right, the Roger Ver and the larger block size was going to be the correct answer. But now that I understand about Lightning, there's just no way that I think that that's going to work. Like Lightning is the way, right? And it's so cool that these things don't really exist at the time you're trying to solve a problem. And then the technology comes in and voila, we have global payment system like instantly for like next to nothing. Oh, that was a question I wanted to ask you. So, Jack Mallers is very fond of saying that I sent it for free. I sent this payment to El Salvador for free, but it's not really free. It's not 0.00. There is something, a fee somewhere. Who gets that? And if I were to have a Lightning Network node, do I receive that payment as someone that validates the node? Like, where does that money come from? Who pays for it, and where does it go?
Okay, great questions. So it depends on how directly you're connected to someone. So if Jack is sending money from himself to someone in El Salvador that he has a direct channel set up with, then he's correct, then he's sending that for free. The only thing that would possibly cost him is a tiny bit of computational power, basically similar to the amount of computational power it takes to send a text message, right? It's not difficult at all. Now, if he doesn't have a direct channel set up to that person and he has to route it through a couple of other people to say, hey, please forward this money to so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, then he is going to wind up paying something, but it's very small. He's basically going to pay routing fees to those nodes that are the intermediaries. And that's like fractions of a penny most of the time. It's very small because it's not computationally heavy. Yeah. It's like asking a computer to forward your Signal message. It's not a big ask. So it's a very small fee. When you do that, for example, the example we did earlier where I'm trying to buy something from Brooke's shop, but I don't have a channel set up with her, but you do, right? And I have a channel with you. So I would ask you to route that node. That transaction, that routing fee would go to you. You would get to keep it.
This is really exciting because in my world of trading, right? I used to be a floor trader and we were always doing electronic trading. There was something called a smart router, which meant that the large firms like Citadel and Peak Six and all the big Timber Hill, all the big trading firms would pay for order flow. How does that work? Well, depending on who pays the most for order flow or the best national bid and offer, depended on how the smart router would route the message and the order. So there's a similarity between payment for order flow and smart routing in the CBOE options world and equity world and the Lightning Network. That's really very interesting. Very cool. So let's just touch a little bit on the Michael Saylor courses. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap up with any questions or anything else you want to talk about. So tell me a little bit about Michael Saylor and what you're doing there.
Yeah, so I wrote a course for Saylor Academy. So Michael Saylor has a nonprofit called Saylor Academy, which is really cool, which I wasn't even aware of until about a year ago, but it's quite cool. And what they do is they provide all of these courses, which I think God, I should know this. I think some of them you can't actually are actually accredited courses, like you can get some credit for, and there's a final exam. And so it's really awesome. And they have a wide variety of topics on there. And of course, because Saylor's, fallen down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, there are some, crypto
Huge.
courses you can
I
take there.
love listening to him. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. But so Andreas Antonopoulos is a big educator in the space, and I've known Andreas for years. I actually met him at one of the Bob Meetups. So there you go. Like, again, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Meetups. And so I met him, and we on and off collaborated on various different events and educational stuff, and helped him like with his YouTube channel a little bit and that sort of thing. But Saylor was looking to create a technical course, right, on Bitcoin for developers. And so long story short, basically I wound up in a situation where I took, because all of the content and the courses at Saylor Academy have to be entirely open source. And one of the things I really love about Andreas is that he makes so much, nearly all of his educational material is free and open. Which is really amazing. So basically I wound up taking a whole bunch of Andreas's material and sort of compiling it into this course for Saylor Academy. And it was a lot of work because Saylor Academy, of all of the different, I've written courses for universities and nonprofits and all this sort of stuff. They have some really strict standards. Like there was the really like high standards on how you have to, organize things and structure things, and even just like the structure of the multiple choice questions for the final exam. So yeah, it took all of that material and shoved it into hopefully a very, well-flowing structured course, introducing developers, people with a technical background to Bitcoin tech. So yeah, it was a lot of work. But
how many tags to like Twitter homeschooling moms have you hit with this? Because I know that if I was doing it all over again, like homeschooling my two youngest ones, I would have gone from some of the other courses that are available, Udemy and the Khan Academy. I would be doing some of the ones from Michael Saylor because I just, I think that he's an amazing influence on this space, and
done a lot for it.
Yeah, bring my kids into that space. Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
You've inspired me to listen or to watch some of these Saylor episodes. It's interesting. I do miss Andreas though. I remember I went to see him at 1871, the Maker Lab, and I got there 2 hours early. I sat in the front row. You were the moderator for some of those. You were doing a great job. So like that time is like so. I feel I get this warm and fuzzy. I'll be honest with you. I kind of miss that. But I don't know. Does that still exist now in other places in the world, or is it like that's gone?
You get pockets of it, but I think for me it was late 2017 when it all changed. And I remember being at a Bob meetup, and it was interesting to run the meetups because it's like every time the price went up, you suddenly have to like find a new venue because you run out of space. Like it was just, very cyclical with the price. But yeah, I remember being at a meetup at Peace, the pizza place on Milwaukee Avenue. And it was packed in there. It's like, oh crap, we need to find a bigger space. And then just stepping outside for a second, just being exhausted and looking in the window at all the people. And it's like, oh, the crowd has really changed. Like for me, that was like a big moment when I was like, oh, this is a different scene now.
Yeah, it's a different vibe.
A different vibe. Yeah, but I still get it in pockets here and there. But it is changed a lot. But yeah, those were good times. Pumping Station 1. I really miss doing the meetups at Pumping Station 1. And then we went to M Hub, and M Hub was really cool too. And it's a lot of awesome events that happened there.
Yeah, for sure. It really was special to be a part of that, and you're in way more than I was. I've been probably more of a observer in the whole space, but just trying to work in my little area. But that's really great. So how do people get in touch with you? Right. So if we have the National Association of Corporate Directors want to contact you about, I shouldn't pick on them because I'm not a member, but I just did that podcast for them. But if someone who is looking to do payments, looking to switch from credit card payments to Lightning Network? Like how would they get in touch with you?
So depend, a variety of ways. I'm on Twitter, and you can, message me on Twitter. I think H Michelle Rose is my handle. I'm on LinkedIn. And then the website for Velas Commerce is just velascommerce.com. And there's a contact form there as well.
Excellent.
And you have our business phone number and an email address. So yeah, there's a wide variety of ways to get in touch with us.
Excellent. Well, listen, as a former homeschooling dad, someone who lived about 8 miles away from growing up, and again, you and Brooke just being incredibly welcoming to the Bob Meetup group, which, I came down and visit. I mean, I just want to tell you from the bottom of my heart, Hannah, that I'm so grateful to you and to these little seeds that you planted, because it has definitely impacted my family, my son, my life, because I'm pivoting my investment advisory business to include Bitcoin and blockchain projects, right? I mean, it's an education problem, but I've been using some products for clients for a couple of years now, and it's super exciting. And again, you're a little bit too early, and now I'm getting more conversation, right? People thought I was out of my mind. What are you doing?
Totally
and now
crazy.
It's
yes.
totally crazy. Like, oh, I'm severing my Bitcoin's a Ponzi scheme. And now they're like, hey, do you think I can get into it now?
Yeah.
Where were you at 7,000? But anyhow, Hannah, thank you so much for sharing your day with us and being with us. I really, really appreciate it. And I really look forward to touching base with you again on philosophy and technology.
Yes.
Wine, and we'll figure out something really
wine
cool.
and technological determinism and philosophy.
Yes.
Let's do it.
Okay.
I'm there.
All
yes.
right. All right, Hannah, thank you so much. Anything else you want to add before we say goodbye?
No, this was a lot of fun. And yeah, thanks for doing this. Cause it's,
you're welcome.
I'm terribly excited to discuss this stuff with people still. Always excited.
Awesome. Well, maybe by next week, I'll figure out how to add you to my Strike app, and let's just send money, because I want to see how it works. I haven't sent any money yet.
Yeah, let's try it. It's always fun to try it. Yeah.
Good. All right. See you later, Hannah. Thank you again.
Yeah. Yep.
Bye-bye.